The first shout cut through the crystal clink hush of the lobby. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to step away from the check-in desk." Conversation died mid-sentence. Glasses froze halfway to lips. The string quartet in the corner stuttered, then faltered into silence. The old man at the marble counter did not turn around. He rested both hands on the polished edge, the dark brown of his skin catching the glow from the chandelier above. His fingers were lined, knuckles knotted with time and work, but steady. His suit wasn't flashy, dark gray, perfectly pressed, the kind of fit you only notice if you pay attention. His shoes were old but spotless. He stared at the young front desk clerk on the other side, who refused to meet his eyes. "Sir." The security chief's voice was louder now, coming up from deep in his chest. "You heard me." A semicircle of staff in perfectly tailored uniforms had formed behind him. Bellhops, concierges, a guest services supervisor with a tight mouth. The gold insignia of the Miramar Crown Hotel glinted on all their lapels. "I heard you," the old man said quietly. A phone camera clicked on with that fake shutter sound. Someone near the lobby bar whispered, "I'm streaming this. Hold up." Glasses turned. Heads tilted. People angled their bodies just enough to look without looking. Wealthy couples, business travelers, influencers with ring lights still clamped to their carry-ons. On the cream marble floor, the old man's battered leather duffel looked painfully out of place. Its corners were worn soft. One handle was wrapped in electrical tape. "Name, so?" the clerk stammered, forcing politeness over the tremor in his voice. "I already gave you my name," the old man said. "Twice. It's just, I'm not finding any reservation. You must be in the wrong hotel." The clerk's eyes flicked to the security chief, nervous. "The, Crown Plaza is 2 blocks down, sir." Laughter snorted out of someone in the back. It was quickly swallowed, but it hung in the air anyway. "This is the right hotel," the old man said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look around at the growing crowd. He stood there, shoulders relaxed but straight, like someone used to being told to move and deciding not to. The guest services supervisor stepped forward, a thin woman with a perfectly smooth bun and a badge that read, "Marina, Guest Experience Manager." "I'm Marina," she said crisply. "If there's been a misunderstanding, I'm happy to help clarify, sir. But at the moment, you're disrupting check-in for other guests." She gestured vaguely at the line behind him. 3 people, all watching this instead of their phones. The old man turned his head slightly, just enough that the side of his face came into view. Close up, the lines around his eyes told stories. Late nights, early mornings, things endured without complaint. One I had a faint scar through the brow. "Clarify," he repeated, tasting the word. "All right, let's clarify." He slid a folded sheet of paper across the counter. The clerk glanced at it and hesitated as if it might bite. "What's that?" Marina asked. "My confirmation," he said, "and my room assignment. Penthouse level. Corner suite." "That's not possible," the clerk blurted. Those rooms are reserved for our premium guests and ownership." His words stumbled on that last term. A murmur rippled through the Gawkers. "I know what they are reserved for," the old man said. The security chief moved closer. He was a broad man with a closely shaven head. His uniform stretched across his shoulders. His badge read G. Turner, Security. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back from the desk," Turner said. "Now, or I'll have to escort you out. You can explain your situation outside." "Outside?" The old man's voice tightened. A crack, quickly smoothed over. "I haven't even stepped in properly yet." A guest near the back spoke into their phone, voice low but excited. "We're at the Miramar Crown, and they're kicking out this old black guy at the front desk. He says he has a room. Look at this." The phone camera lifted, zooming in. Another guest, a college-age kid in a hoodie under an expensive coat, held his phone higher, going vertical for a better stream. "Dude, this is going to blow up," the kid muttered to his friend. "Delete that, please," Marina snapped, catching sight of him. He pretended not to hear. "Sir," Marina addressed the old man again. "Unfortunately, our system doesn't show any booking under that name, and we have very strict protocols about who has access to those floors." If you'll allow us to call you a cab, we'll be happy to cover the fare to a hotel that can accommodate you." "You think I can't afford this one?" the old man asked. Nobody answered. Turner folded his arms. "It's not about that, sir. It's about our security. People come in here all the time trying to sneak into areas they don't belong." "And what about who does belong?" the old man asked softly. The question drifted into the chandelier light and seemed to stick there. A little girl near the lobby sofas tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Why are they yelling at Grandpa?" she asked, in a voice too loud. Her mother whispered something and pulled her closer. "I've shown you my ID," the old man continued, still calm. "I've shown you my confirmation. You've scanned the QR code twice. You've checked my card." "I'm sorry," the clerk said, color rising in his face. "It's just, the card you're using doesn't match typical profiles we have for." "For what?" the old man asked. His eyes, a deep, almost golden brown, locked on the kid. "For penthouse-level guests," Marina cut in quickly. "Profiles," the old man repeated. He inhaled slowly. "You mean I don't look like I belong upstairs?" Turner's jaw clenched. "So, that's not what anyone said. But it's what everyone is thinking," the old man replied. The live-streaming kid whispered, "Oh, he said it," to the camera. "Sir, I'm going to count to 3, Turner said, his voice dropping into that falsely polite register bouncer's use. "If you don't step away from the desk, we'll escort you outside. If you resist, we'll have to involve law enforcement." "I'd really rather not do that," gasped from the back. Someone murmured, "They're going to call the cops on him for trying to check in." The old man finally turned his back on the desk and faced the lobby. Dozens of eyes were on him now. Phones, half-hidden expressions, some pity, some discomfort, some eager anticipation of drama. He saw the tuxedoed man by the bar pretending to scroll. The older couple clutching their rolling luggage a little tighter. 2 women swapped looks over their champagne flutes. He took it all in, slowly. Then he looked straight into the nearest phone camera, the one held by the kid in the hoodie. "My name," he said clearly, each word precise and calm, "is Leonard Hayes." The kid shifted, refocusing. "Leonard, how do you spell that?" he whispered, mostly to himself, already imagining the caption. "And before you ask me to leave the property you're so desperate to protect," Leonard went on, "you might want to make absolutely sure you know who you're throwing out." He reached into his inner jacket pocket. Turner's hand shot out, preemptive. "So, keep your hands visible." Leonard's fingers paused, then continued anyway. He pulled out a slim, worn leather wallet and something else, a sleek black card case with a tiny embossed logo that matched the one above the front desk. He set both gently on the marble. The phone zoomed in. The moment stretched thin, ready to snap. "Because," Leonard said, his voice dropping so low that people leaned forward to hear, "if you're wrong." He smiled, just a hint, like someone who knew a secret and had been patient about it for far too long. "Your lives are about to change." The lobby held its breath. And for a heartbeat, before anyone moved, before any card was opened or any call made, Leonard was back in another room, another time, breathing dust instead of perfume, listening to a younger version of the same sentence, "You don't belong here," and deciding, once and for all, that the world was wrong about where he did. 40 years earlier, the floors he mopped had been concrete. They were not warmed by underfloor heating. They were cold enough that the water turned his knuckles numb in winter, and the rust-flavored dust rose at every stroke of his mop in summer. Back then, it wasn't the Miramar Crown. It was the Royal Pacific Hotel, an aging mid-tier property near the old financial district, long before the city was a playground of light and glass. Back then, Leonard didn't wear a suit. He wore a faded blue uniform with someone else's name stitched over the heart. The previous guy had been named Carlos. Management hadn't bothered buying new ones for the night crew. His shift started at 10 p.m. and ended whenever his body couldn't go anymore. He was 23, with a bad back from lifting crates at the docks and a deeper ache from the last argument with his father that still echoed in his ears. His mother had pressed a packed sandwich into his hand and whispered, "You don't have to prove anything to them, but you keep proving it anyway," and he hadn't known how to stop. He remembered the first night he walked into that hotel lobby. It had been nice to him. Then, Clean, bright, an ocean-themed mural on the ceiling and potted palms by the revolving doors. The night manager had barely looked up from the logbook. Janitor closets down the hall. Left, he'd said. You share it with housekeeping. Don't scratch the floors. Don't speak to the guests unless they speak to you. And if they do, remember you're replaceable. He'd said that last part with the easy cruelty of someone who'd said it before. In his pocket, Leonard had the bus schedule, a tiny spiral notebook, and a pen he'd borrowed and never quite found the courage to return. He planned on using his breaks to write down something. He didn't know what yet. Thoughts, numbers, things he overheard, ideas he didn't have language for. That first night, at 2 a.m, while scrubbing a stain out of the second-floor hallway carpet, he heard it. The elevator doors slid open. A pair of men in suits stepped out, voices low but clear. Their laughter bounced off the empty walls. One of them carried a bottle by the neck. Did you see the numbers on that place downtown? One man said. Crazy. They are bleeding money and they don't even know it. I told you, the other replied. Hospitality's changing. It's not about beds and breakfast anymore. It's about experience. You want them to step into another world for a night. They walked closer. Leonard kept his head down, scrubbing, hoping they wouldn't complain about him being in the way. The Royal Pacific, the first man snorted. This place is done in 5 years. 10 if they get lucky. Look at this carpet. I'd knock out that wall, the other said. Open up the lobby. Tear out the front desk. Go digital. Make it feel like walking into a private club. Yeah? And who's going to fund that? The elevator dinged again. They stepped in. Their voices faded as the doors slid shut. Leonard's arm kept moving in slow, practiced circles, but his mind had stopped. Another world for a night, he thought. Experience. He looked around. The dated furniture, the scuffed baseboards, the bland art. He thought of the homeowners whose floors he'd polished, the restaurants where he'd washed dishes, the back doors he'd carried deliveries through. What if I owned a place like this? The thought was ridiculous enough that he almost laughed. People like him didn't own hotels. People like him barely got to stay in them without someone following them down the hall to make sure they were going where they said they were going. But the idea stuck. It rode home on the bus at dawn, sitting on the torn vinyl seat beside him. It followed him into sleep. It met him again the next night and the next. He started to watch differently. The front desk clerks rotated through. Some were kind, some were not. Most were tired. He watched how they handled complaints, how they smiled or didn't, how they typed faster when certain guests walked up and slower when others did. He watched who tipped and who didn't, who looked him in the eye when they asked for directions and who seemed surprised he could speak in complete sentences. He learned the camera's blind spots, not for theft but because it fascinated him that there were always places no one had bothered to see. He began to notice numbers. The conference room on Tuesdays, always full around lunchtime. What time the tour buses came. How often the Bell staff was overwhelmed, and how often they leaned on their carts scrolling through their phones. He filled his notebook, tiny, crabbed handwriting, numbers in columns, diagrams of the lobby with arrows for foot traffic, words scribbled in the margins. Bottleneck, underutilized, waste. On his breaks, he read receipts, abandoned newspapers, magazines left in trash cans. Eventually, books from the library. He found one called The Business of Hospitality and read it 3 times, underlining passages with a borrowed highlighter. He learned to make coffee better than the machine in the staff break room. He started bringing extra in a thermos for the housekeeping team. They started bringing him stories. You know, Mr. Leonard, one of the older housekeepers said. They called him Mr. not because of his position, but because of his habit of listening like what they said mattered. If I were running this place, I'd start by changing how they treat us. How would you do it? He asked. She told him. He wrote it down. Years passed. He moved from nights to evenings, from janitorial to maintenance, from maintenance to assistant facilities manager. The promotions came slow, and sometimes not at all, but he kept showing up, kept watching, kept learning. He took classes at the community college with money he didn't exactly have. Accounting, marketing, eventually, a course on real estate finance that nearly broke his brain but left him with new words: leverage, valuation, equity. Once, When he was 28, he'd been asked to come to the lobby to clean up a spill. A child had dropped a soda. Ice spread across the marble like little shards. He bent to mop it up, nearby conversations passing over him like waves. "This place has so much potential," someone was saying. "Wrong neighborhood, wrong brand, wrong era, but the bones are good." It was the same voice from years before. He looked up, slightly. The man in the expensive suit was older now, hair receding, but that same easy arrogance in his stance. He stood with another investor, pointing around at columns and ceiling. "You tear it down," the other man asked. "Not tear," the first man said thoughtfully. "Transform. New name, new logo, new everything. Position it as luxury but accessible. A place people brag about staying. You build a story, they'll pay to be part of it." "How much?" the other asked. "For the building?" The man shrugged. "Depends how desperate the current owner is." Desperate, Leonard thought. He'd seen the overdue notices on the office copier, the corners of envelopes peeking from drawers. Later that night, in the quiet humming glow of the boilers, Leonard did the math. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Property value, renovation cost, occupancy rates. He made columns, added, subtracted, tried again. He saw something that made his hands shake. If someone bought the hotel cheap enough, and if they transformed it the right way, and if occupancy rose to even a modest percentage over 3 years, and if, always if, stacked like shaky chairs, then the place could be profitable. Good profitable. Life-changing profitable. Not for him, of course. He was a night-shift maintenance worker with a community college textbook sliding off his lap. People like him didn't buy hotels. But the numbers didn't know that. Numbers didn't care. He taped that page of calculations inside the back of his notebook. The Royal Pacific changed hands 3 times over the next 15 years. Each time, the logo out front shifted, new uniforms arrived in boxes, fresh slogans were slapped on brochures and then quietly retired. Each new owner brought big ideas and bigger debt. Some talked to Leonard like he was furniture. Some gave him a nod in the hallway. None asked him what he thought. He never volunteered. He just watched, learned, saved. His mother's old phrase, "We don't have much, but we have enough to share," became his private vow in reverse. "I don't have much, but I have enough to grow." He lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and a view of the alley. He resisted the pull of shiny things. He bought second-hand clothes and wore them until the seams begged for mercy. He paid off one small loan, then another. He bought a slight share in a laundromat, then a larger share in a failing diner that he helped turn around. And every month, without fail, he set aside whatever he could in an account he almost never looked at because when he did, the numbers seemed too small and the mountain too high. Once, after a guest had screamed at him for taking too long to fix a broken faucet, and the manager had apologized to the guest and not to him, he stood in the supply closet, fists clenched, vision blurring. He wanted to quit, walk out, leave them with their dripping sinks and their entitled sneers. Instead, he pulled out his notebook and wrote, in block letters, on the inside of the back cover, "One day, you will sign their checks." He underlined it until the paper almost tore. Years rolled forward. He got older. The crew around him cycled younger, faces fresh and hopeful, then ground down and gone. He invested in small things. He lost money sometimes. He learned from those losses. He bought a share in a community center project. He teamed up with a quiet, sharp-eyed woman who ran a tiny travel agency for Black families wanting safe vacation options. She became his business partner, then his wife. Together, they bought their first small inn in a coastal town nobody bragged about visiting. They painted it with their own hands. They greeted guests at the door. They made breakfast until dawn, then cleaned until noon, then collapsed into the one working armchair and dreamed about the next one. One and became two. Two became a portfolio. Not overnight. Not in a montage. Slowly, painfully, with setbacks and sick days and roofs that leaked at the worst times and staff that quit without warning and contractors who overcharged them because they thought they didn't know better. But they kept showing up. They kept reading contracts. They kept asking questions that made bankers frown and then nod. When Leonard turned 58, his wife lit candles on a simple cake and said, I think it's time you go look at that old place of yours." "What old place?" he said, though he knew. "The first one," she replied. "The one that taught you what not to do. The one you almost quit over." He laughed. "The Royal Pacific. That thing's probably a parking lot by now." She slid a file folder across the table. He opened it. Inside were printouts, listings, financials, a name that was both familiar and brand new. Miramar Crown Hotel, investment opportunity. The property had been heavily leveraged, then hit by a downturn. Occupancy had sunk. An investor group had bled it dry. Now, a majority stake was quietly being shopped around to qualified buyers. He read the numbers. Then he read them again. He ran the same math he'd run in the boiler room decades earlier, now with a lifetime of experience laid on top of it. When he looked up, his wife was watching him with that calm, steady gaze that had anchored him for half his life. "You're qualified," she said. "Am I?" he whispered. "You are," she said. "And if they don't see it, we'll show them." The next 2 years were an ocean of paperwork and meetings and negotiations where suits in glass towers warned him gently about the learning curve of operating in the luxury segment, as if he hadn't scrubbed luxury toilets and fixed luxury boilers for most of his adult life. He let them talk. He smiled while they underestimated him. He listened not to their tone but to their terms. He carved out clauses where he needed them. He brought in partners who respected his vision. In exchange for that vision, and his capital, hard-earned and hard-saved, he secured a controlling interest in the property that now gleamed under the name Miramar Crown. The old Royal Pacific was gutted and reborn under Leonard's eye. They tore out walls exactly where he'd once circled on a hand-drawn diagram. They flooded the lobby with light. They installed local art that meant something. They kept the staff corridor doors wide and well-lit and made sure the break room had windows. He sat in on the final interview panels for senior staff. He listened for the words, "We value all our guests equally," and then watched the eyes to see if they meant it. Not all of them did. His advisors raised eyebrows when he insisted on revised training, on community partnership, on scholarship programs for hospitality students from underrepresented neighborhoods. "Is this about charity?" one board member asked, with a faint hint of polite skepticism. Leonard leaned back, interlaced his fingers, and looked at the man. "It's about building the kind of place we claim to be," he said. "A crown means something, or at least it should." He visited the property often at first. Staff greeted him as Mr. Hayes when they saw him, though many only knew him as a name on the email footer or a face from a framed photo in the back office. He walked the floors like he always had, but now he walked them slow, not because his knees protested, though they did, but because he wanted to hear everything. He listened to complaints, praises, jokes. He made notes. He adjusted. And then, as good systems and good people settled into place, he stepped back. Let his general manager run day-to-day. Trusted, but verified from a distance. He didn't need to be seen to own the place. He just needed the place to be what they said it was, a sanctuary of welcome. Which is why, on that gray Tuesday morning when he decided to drop by unannounced, he left the town car at home and took a cab. He wore his old suit because it was comfortable, carried the duffel because he liked the weight of it. He wanted to feel the hotel the way any guest would, see the cracks that only showed when no one knew the owner was watching. He stepped through the revolving doors alone, exhaling as the scent of polished wood and bergamot wrapped around him. What he found at the front desk, 20 minutes later, told him exactly where the cracks still were. By the time turners started counting, by the time phones lifted and faces turned, by the time Leonard placed his worn wallet and the sleek, embossed card case on the marble between them, 40 years of rooms and floors and numbers lay coiled inside him, not as anger, but as something stronger. Resolve. "So, step away from the desk." Turner's voice was louder now, firmer. A vein pulsed at his temple. He had moved closer, big frame blocking part of the lobby from view. Behind him, 2 more security staff had appeared, hands hovering near their radios. "One," Turner said. Leonard didn't move. The boy with the live stream muttered, "Chat, look at this guy. He's just standing there. This is crazy." Across the lobby, a woman in a navy blazer, corporate, not hotel staff, had emerged from the elevator bank and was striding toward the commotion, heels biting into the marble. Marina saw her and straightened. Relief flickered across her face. "Two," Turner said. The phone zoomed tighter on Leonard's still figure, on the thin scar through his eyebrow, on the slight tremble in his right hand that only someone very close would notice. "Don't touch him," a voice called from the back. A middle-aged man in a conference badge. "Is not doing anything. Is refusing to comply with security instruction," Marina shot back, her voice sharpening. "Sir, this is private property. We have the right to ask anyone to leave." "On what grounds?" another guest asked. She had her phone up too, but her eyes were steady, not gleeful. "Because it's insisting you check your own error." Turner ignored them. "Three," he said. He reached out and put a hand on Leonard's arm. The contact snapped something in the room. "Hey," the college kid yelped. "They are putting hands on him." The livestream comments flooded in so fast his screen blurred with them. Leonard looked down at Turner's hand. It wasn't a rough grip. Not yet. More like a warning. "Mr. Turner," Leonard said quietly, voice velvet over stone. "I'd let go if I were you." Turner's jaw tightened. "You don't get to give orders, hey?" Leonard tilted his head. "Is that right?" The woman in the navy blazer reached them then. Breath slightly quick, ID lanyard swinging. The badge clipped to her lapel read, Regional Operations Director. "Marina, what is going on?" she asked, scanning the scene. The cameras, the cluster of staff, the old man at the center, calm as a rock in white water. "Ms. Alvarez," Marina exhaled, relief spilling out with the name. "We have a non-registered individual demanding access to the penthouse floor. His refusing to leave. His causing a disturbance and—" "Is he armed?" Alvarez asked. "No," Turner said, still not loosening his grip. "Has he threatened anyone?" His presence is making guests uncomfortable," Marina said. "Some of us are uncomfortable with you," the woman with the phone from earlier muttered, not quite under her breath. Alvarez glanced at her, then at Leonard. "So, I'm Elena Alvarez, Regional Operations Director for Miramar Hospitality. If there's been a misunderstanding, we can resolve it more calmly in my office. But you are creating a scene in the lobby, and that impacts our other guests." Leonard's eyes flicked to the ID badge. "Alvarez," he said, "based in the downtown office." "Yes," she said, caught off guard. "Have we met?" "Not officially," he said, "but I've seen your reports. Your quarterly breakdown on staffing retention was interesting." She blinked. "I'm sorry." Turner frowned. Marina darted a confused look between them. "Sir," Alvarez began again, regaining her footing. "If you will come this way, we can." "I'm not going anywhere until we settle exactly what's happened here," Leonard said. "Sir." And, he added, "until your staff takes their hand off me." The phones caught that line perfectly. Someone near the sofas whispered, "Oh, that's a bar," before realizing they weren't on TikTok but in the middle of it. Turner's hand dropped from Leonard's arm, more out of reflex than obedience, as if the ground had shifted under him. "Fine," Alvarez said. "Then at least let's verify your information one more time." She leaned over the desk, snapping her fingers for the clerk's attention. "Pull up the reservation system," she said briskly. "Search by name and confirmation code. We're doing this by the book one more time, and then—" "I already told them my name," Leonard said. "Then tell me," Alvarez replied. "Maybe I'll have better luck." "Leonard Hayes," he said, for the second time that morning. Something flickered behind her eyes at the sound of it. Not recognition, not yet, but a near miss, like a familiar song heard through a wall. She typed it into the system anyway. The cursor blinked. The screen thought. The clerk swallowed. "Nothing under that name," she prompted. The clerk squinted. I have. Hayes, Leonard. But it's not under today's check-in. It's under—" he scrolled. "It says, continuous access. No set checkout date. That can't be right. And the notes—" He stopped, eyes widening as he read, lips moving silently over the words. "What?" Alvarez snapped. "What do the notes say?" He looked at her, then at Leonard, then back at the screen like it might burst into flames. "It says," his voice dropped. "It says owner account. The word hung in the air. Owner. The crowd noise dipped suddenly, the way it does when a DJ cuts the track and everyone's voices drop in the same breath. Turner's brows knit. Owner? That can't be right. I know who owns this place. It's a group, not a... The clerk cleared his throat. It says, primary controlling partner. Board chair. Access all areas. Do not restrict or delay. Alert general manager upon arrival. His voice had gone thin. Alvarez's fingers froze above the keyboard. The livestream kid swung his phone between Leonard and the desk screen, trying to capture both. This for real, he whispered to his viewers. Chat, they just said he's the owner. Like, owns the hotel. Alvarez inhaled slowly. That must be a system error, she said. The ownership group is. Leonard reached over, picked up the sleek black card case he'd laid on the desk, and flipped it open. Inside, nestled in foam, was a single key card. Its design was different from the guest cards, black, with a Miramar Crown logo in matte gold, and beneath it, in small, engraved letters, L. Hayes Principal. He set it gently beside the clerk's trembling hand. That key, Leonard said, his voice suddenly not soft at all but carrying easily to every corner of the lobby, will open every restricted door in this building, including the ones your staff use. The room had gone very quiet. Alvarez stayed at the card, then at Leonard. Her face had turned the color of unbaked bread. Mr. Hayes, she said, the name a question now, not just a label. As in, Miramar Crown Holdings. As in the person who signs your expense approvals, Leonard replied. The color drained from her face entirely. From somewhere in the back of the crowd, a strangled little laugh escaped someone's throat. It wasn't amusement. It was shock pushing out through the only available exit. Turner took a small step back. Marina's lips parted, then closed, then parted again, her brain scrambling to rearrange reality around this new center of gravity. Mr. Hayes, she managed, if you are indeed. Leonard raised one eyebrow. If, he repeated. She stopped. I apologize, she said quickly. Clearly there's been a miscommunication in the system and we were not informed that. You are arriving today. If you'll allow me to personally escort you to. Leonard's gaze flicked pointedly to Turner, to Marina, to the clerk, to the watching staff, to the phones, unblinking eyes recording every micro-expression. This isn't about whether I make it to my room, he said. I always get where I'm going. He turned a fraction, addressing not just them but all of them. The crowd, the lenses, the invisible audience already forming in the clouds somewhere above their heads. This is about what happens here when you think nobody's watching, he said. Silence. Somewhere, a spoon clinked against porcelain and then went still. The clock looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Turner's hands opened and closed at his sides, as if he were trying to squeeze the moment back into something manageable. Mr. Hayes, Alvarez began, voice strained. I assure you, we take our responsibility to every guest very seriously. If anyone has spoken to you in a way that was disrespectful or biased, that is absolutely not company policy and we will. Will what? Leonard asked softly. Put a statement on your website. Add a slide to your training module. He wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. The cameras caught every word. He reached into his wallet this time, slowly, letting the staff see his hands, his movements. He pulled out a business card, thicker, cream-colored, with the same Crown logo. He set it on the desk next to his keycard. The card read, Leonard J. Hayes, founder and chair Miramar Crown Hospitality Group. There it was. Public. Undeniable. Even from 10 feet away, the text was readable on the phone screens. Someone zoomed in, capturing every serif. Turner's face went slack. The clock made a tiny sound, like air leaving a balloon. Marina swayed. For a second, Leonard thought she might actually faint. That can't be real, someone whispered behind him. The woman with the steady eyes and the phone spoke up. I've seen his face, she said, in an article about black hotel owners. It's him. The college kid's chat exploded. Oh my god, no way, this is a movie, they messed W the wrong one, owner plot twist. Alvarez swallowed. Mr. Hayes, she said again, the words now soaked in a different tone entirely. Not just respect. Fear. Mr. Turner, Leonard said, without looking at her, a moment ago, you were counting to 3 and threatening to have me arrested. Turner's throat worked. I was following procedure, sir. Protocol, Marina added quickly, voice high and breathy. We have to be careful about who accesses certain areas. We can't just let anyone. Leonard looked at her. She fell silent. He let the quiet sit. 1 second. 2. 3. Each heartbeat loud enough to hear. You were not careful, he said finally. You were comfortable. No one in the lobby moved. You didn't question your system, Leonard continued, his eyes on Marina but his words sweeping through the space. You didn't question whether the confirmation codes were glitching, whether the name you typed had an extra space, whether the scanner at your desk needs maintenance. You questioned me. He spread his hands slightly, palms up. Because to you, I didn't fit your idea of who belongs where. The word belong seemed to echo off the marble. Marina's mascaraed eyes filled with sudden, hot tears. That's not fair, she whispered. We have all kinds of guests here. He shook his head. If you had spoken to me with half the respect you reserve for a platinum card, we would not be here. The security radios crackled softly, then died. The string quartet in the corner hadn't dared resume. A bellhop stood frozen in mid-step, luggage trolley paused like a sculpture. Somewhere, someone had started a second live stream, capturing the whole thing from another angle. Leonard could feel it, this moment splitting, duplicating, traveling outward. Not just through the phones, but through every person standing there, ready to retell it over dinner, in group chats, in boardrooms. Alvarez seemed to snap back into herself. Everyone, she said, voice tight, back to your posts. We will handle this. Mr. Hayes, if we could speak in private. We will, Leonard said, but not before we're done here. He looked around, taking in the watching faces, the staff, the guests, the cameras. You all came for a story today, didn't you? He asked the room. A luxury hotel, a dramatic scene, security, an old black man being told he doesn't belong. Some of you hit record as soon as you smelled trouble. No one denied it. The college kid's hand trembled around his phone. For the first time, he shifted from excited to uneasy. I don't blame you, Leonard said. Stories like this are old. Older than this building. Older than me. He brushed his fingers across the old scar in his brow, unconsciously. But here's the thing. He tapped the card on the counter lightly. Usually, the man being shown the door is not the one who owns the keys. That line would be replayed thousands of times before the day was over. Right now, though, it melted through the lobby like heat. The fallout started before Leonard took his first step toward the elevator. A hashtag emerged within minutes on the youngest guest stream. #crowned but not welcome. It wasn't particularly clever, but it was catchy enough, and a video attached to it, of Turner gripping Leonard's arm, of Marina suggesting a different hotel, of the reveal, did the rest. People in the lobby watched their screens as the view count ascended like an elevator in fast motion. Dude, the college kid whispered to no one and to everyone, it's at 10,000 already. Send me the link, someone murmured. I want to show my sister. Alvarez tried again to herd the moment back under corporate control. Mr. Hayes, she said, voice trembling but clipped, we can absolutely address your concerns and discuss disciplinary action for any staff who may have misapplied our policies. But for the sake of your privacy and our other guests' experience, I must insist that we move this conversation somewhere more discreet. Leonard considered her. Privacy, he said. That ship sailed when your staff decided to humiliate me in front of a lobby full of people. We weren't, Marina began. You asked if I could afford to be here, Leonard said. You suggested another hotel that might be more appropriate for me. You threatened to call the police because I insisted you check your own system. I never mentioned the police, Marina protested. You didn't have to, Leonard replied. Your security chief did. All eyes swung to Turner. He looked physically pained. Sir, I was just trying to maintain order. If you'd had a weapon or... Leonard's eyebrows snapped together. A weapon, he repeated. Is that what you saw when you looked at me? The question had no safe answer. Turner's gaze dropped. I'm sorry, sir, he said. It came out stiff, unused. A door near the back opened with a soft click. The hotel's general manager appeared, ties slightly askew as if he'd dressed in a hurry. Mr. Hayes, he said, breathless. I came as soon as I was told you were here. I had no idea. I mean, of course I knew you might visit, but I never, he faltered, taking in the scene, the phones, the tight faces. Leonard had hired him personally. He was good at numbers, good at smoothing things over, not as good at seeing problems before they became headlines. You were told I was here. Leonard asked mildly. The GM winced. Not until, just now. Someone from the front desk messaged me that there was an issue. An issue, Leonard repeated. His voice wasn't mocking. It was too tired for mockery. Please, the GM said. Let's move this into the conference suite. We can handle it. Leonard supplied. Minimize it. He saw the flinch and shook his head. This will not be minimized, he said. The cameras drank in every word. If you try to sweep this under some plush carpet, he continued, it'll crawl back out under the door. Things like this always do. Ask anyone out there who's had their character questioned while they were just trying to go about their day. The woman with the steady eyes nodded slowly. Then what would you like us to do? Alvarez asked. Genuine desperation threaded her words now. You're right. We can't undo what has happened. But we can respond to it appropriately. We will suspend the staff involved, launch an internal investigation, update our training, issue a statement. Launch an investigation. Leonard said. Into what? Whether what just happened in front of your own eyes really happened. He leaned on the counter slightly, not because he needed to, but because it gave his hands something to do besides curl into fists. You can suspend whoever you need to, he said. That's operational. That's your job. My job is to decide what kind of place this is, what kind of company we are. And what kind of company is that? Someone called, phone still held high. Leonard answered without looking at them. A company that says every guest is welcome, he said. A company that puts those words on brochures and websites and elevator posters. A company that sponsors diversity panels and donates to community programs and puts my face on a magazine once a year to talk about progress. He finally turned toward the voice, toward the cameras, toward the unseen millions. But words are cheap, he said. It's what you do when nobody knows who's watching that costs you something. He looked back at his staff. At the very least, he said slowly, I expect the people who wear this logo, he touched the crown pin on Turner's lapel, to know the difference between a security threat and an old man trying to check into his own hotel. That line hit like a dropped tray. Sharp. Echoing. Marina's shoulders shook. She pressed her lips together so hard they turned white. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I swear I didn't mean. To what? Leonard asked gently. Say out loud what you've been trained to think quietly. She flinched. He sighed. I don't think you woke up this morning intending to make a stranger feel small, he said. None of you did. But that's the problem. If we only measure ourselves by what we intend, we never see what we've actually done. Behind the phones, some guests shifted, uncomfortable with how easily his words expanded beyond the lobby, beyond the staff, beyond this single moment. That includes me, he added, almost as an afterthought. I own this place. I set the tone. If this is how my staff responds to a guest who doesn't fit their expectations, that's on me. I built something that allowed that to happen. The admission landed heavily. It disarmed some of the defensive tension in the staff's shoulders. It also deepened the GM's anxiety. If the owner was taking responsibility, it meant the spotlight wouldn't stop at middle management. Alvarez glanced at the swirling live-stream comments on a nearby screen and swallowed. Mr. Hayes, the board, she began. The board will hear from me, he said, as will our partners, as will our lawyers, and as of this afternoon, so will the press. That sent a different jolt through the group. Self-preservation moved through their faces like a wind. You're going public? The GM asked. I don't have a choice, Leonard said. The story is already public. The question is whether we tell it ourselves or let the world tell it for us. From somewhere in the back, A quiet voice said, "Amen." "So," Turner said, finding his voice again, "if I could just say." "You will have a chance to explain your decisions," Leonard said. "To HR, to our Diversity Council, maybe to an outside mediator, depending how far this goes. Right now, I suggest you stop talking and start listening." Turner shut his mouth. Leonard straightened up, every joint reminding him of its age. "I will check into my suite," he said, "to know one and everyone. I will do what I came here to do, which is walk this property and see it with my own eyes." He paused, and then, "Ms. Alvarez, Mr. Chong, we will sit in a room and decide what accountability looks like when a company that prides itself on hospitality treats its own owner like a trespasser because he doesn't look the way they expect an owner to look." No one argued. He gathered his wallet and cards, slipped them back into his jacket, picked up his battered duffel. As he turned toward the elevator bank, the crowd parted. Some moved quickly, as if proximity might make them complicit. Others stepped aside slowly, eyes lingering with a mixture of shame and reluctant admiration. The little girl who'd asked about Grandpa peeked around her mother's hip. Leonard caught her eye and gave her a small smile. Her face brightened instinctively before confusion tugged it back down. He stepped into the elevator. Just before the doors slid shut, he looked back at the lobby one last time. Half a dozen phones were still pointed at him. He met one lens dead on. "Keep recording," he said softly. The doors closed. By evening, the stock chart had developed a nervous tremor. Shares of Miramar Crown Hospitality weren't exactly the stuff of Wall Street legends, but they were stable enough to appear in cautious portfolios. The company's annual report featured tidy graphs and optimistic language about expansion into emerging experiences. None of that language had anticipated Crown but not welcome trending globally. Clips of the confrontation looped on news channels within hours. Overnight talk shows played the video, then cut to panels of commentators who alternated between outrage and world-weary nods at the familiarity of the story. "An old black man walks into a luxury hotel he happens to own," one host said, "and gets treated like an intruder. What century are we in?" Companies that had lauded Miramar's commitment to inclusion in sponsored posts quietly archived them. A conference planner tweeted that they were reconsidering their contract with the Miramar Crown for an upcoming summit. A celebrity chef posted, "This the same hotel group I was about to partner with? We need to talk." Internally, emails flew faster than the elevators. Subject lines screamed in muted corporate language: "Urgent. Lobby incident. Immediate response strategy required. Media inquiry protocol. Board call. Emergency session." In his suite, Leonard sat at the small desk by the window, city lights glittering below him, the muted television replaying his own face in the background. The footage showed him from unflattering angles. His age looked more pronounced. His suit looked more worn. He didn't care. He was writing, not a statement, though PR had sent him 3 drafts already, each one more sanitized than the last. Not a legal response, though the lawyers had thrown around phrases like liability mitigation and preemptive settlement structures. He was writing a letter to the staff, handwritten, at first, in that same compact script that had filled his notebooks decades ago. Later, it would be typed and translated and emailed and printed and tacked up in break rooms worldwide. But for now, it was ink on hotel stationery. He wrote about his first night as a janitor, about the carpet, about listening through elevator doors. He wrote about how power felt different depending on which side of a counter you were on. He wrote about bias not as a personal failing, but as a learned habit that could be unlearned, but only if you were brave enough to admit you had it. He wrote about hospitality as an art that began long before someone handed over a credit card. He finished it just as his meeting with the board pinged onto his tablet. They wanted to talk about damage control, about narratives, about shareholder expectations. They wanted to reassure him that the company's written policies were airtight, that this was an isolated incident. He let them talk. Then he told them what they were going to do. Suspensions were the easy part. Turner was placed on administrative leave pending a review. Marina was too. The clerk was temporarily reassigned away from the front desk. Some in the lobby, watching the news scroll on hotel screens that evening, cheered quietly. Leonard didn't. The sight of Turner's face, stricken in the HR office, didn't bring him any satisfaction. Nor did Marina's shaking hands as she signed her suspension notice. Consequences were necessary, yes. But if all they did was cut out visible rot and call the tree healthy, they would have learned nothing. So Leonard went further. He pushed for a full, independent audit of Miramai's hiring, promotion, and guest treatment data. He demanded that the audit's results be made public, not buried in a PDF no one read. He insisted that every executive, from the COO to the regional directors to the board members themselves, attend workshops not about diversity as a corporate metric but about humility and listening, led by people who would not be impressed by their titles. He allocated funds, not out of the community relations budget, but out of capital expenditures, for a multi-year training program designed with input from staff at every level, including housekeeping, security, and maintenance. The sessions would cover bias, de-escalation, and most importantly, how to question your own assumptions before they turned into actions. He ordered that the phrase "we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone" be removed from all internal documents and replaced with a more precise, harder-to-hide-behind standard. "We reserve the right to protect the safety and dignity of all our guests and staff," the new line read. Any denial of service must be documented with specific behavior-based reasons and is subject to review. The lawyers winced at the increased accountability. Leonard didn't back down. "You hired me to grow this company," he reminded the less enthusiastic board members. "Sometimes growth looks like opening a new property. Sometimes it looks like admitting where we've failed." "And what about the staff in that lobby?" one board member asked. "Are you planning to make an example of them?" Leonard sat back. "I intend to make an example of us," he said. "If all we learn from this is that 3 people made a bad call, then we haven't learned anything at all." The stock dipped, then sank, then steadied, buoyed partially by statements from longtime partners who said they were encouraged by Miramai's transparent and proactive response. Some customers canceled. Others booked intentionally, leaving notes in their reservation forms that read things like, "Here because you admitted you were wrong. Don't make me regret it." The internet had its fun for a week. Memes of Leonard superimposed over stock photos of bewildered hotel staff, captions like "when you get kicked out of your own hotel" paired with reaction gifs. But under the jokes, something else simmered. Black travelers and other guests of color shared stories of being followed by security, questioned at check-in, assumed to be staff or entertainers instead of guests. The lobby video of Leonard became a touchpoint, a shorthand. People called it that crown moment when referencing similar incidents. Leonard read more of those stories than was good for his blood pressure. He read them anyway. He instructed his team to reach out privately to some of the people whose experiences were particularly painful, not to offer free stays as hush money, but to invite them onto a newly formed advisory council. "We need people who will tell us the truth," he said, "even when it hurts." Meanwhile, Turner sat in his small apartment, the uniform that had made him feel solid now a folded accusation on his kitchen chair. He watched the video of himself, hand on Leonard's arm, over and over. At first, he saw only context, the kind of things he'd been trained to watch for. A man at the desk without a record. Elevated tone. Potential for disturbance. He heard his own voice in the clip, calm but firm, just like the manual. But the more he watched, the more he saw what his training hadn't covered. The way Leonard never raised his voice. The steadiness in his eyes. The way Turner's hand looked on his arm. Large, dark, authoritative. And how, for a split second, something that looked like fear flickered in Leonard's face, then disappeared under the practiced calm of someone who had met that moment before. It made Turner's stomach twist. He thought of his teenage son. He imagined someone grabbing his arm like that in a lobby, counting to 3. He put his head in his hands and wept, quietly, so his neighbors wouldn't hear. Marina retreated to her sister's house for the duration of her suspension. Away from the hotel's polished surfaces, away from guest surveys and occupancy forecasts, she saw herself reflected in a different mirror. Her sister, Anais, hugged her hard. "You messed up," she said, blunt as always. "You know that, right?" Marina nodded miserably. "I was just doing my job. I thought." "And what is your job?" her sister asked. To make people feel welcome or to make yourself feel safe. I never thought of myself as, Marina began, then choked on the word, as biased. Her sister snorted. That's your problem. You didn't think about it at all. The conversation stung, but she needed it. When her email chimed with an invitation, not a summons, to a voluntary reflection and training series led by an external facilitator, Marina clicked yes before she could talk herself out of it. She wanted to keep her job. But more than that, to her surprise, she wanted to be worthy of the company she thought she was working for. 3 weeks after the lobby incident, Leonard stood in a conference room on the lower level, facing an audience of staff. No cameras this time, no live streams, just rows of chairs, a pot of coffee, and people in uniforms, housekeeping, security, front desk, food service. The people who made the place actually run. An HR rep had introduced him in corporate phrases. Our esteemed founder, humbling moment, opportunity to grow. But Leonard had asked them to keep it short. He stepped up to the podium without notes. Most of you know who I am by now, he said, and a low murmur of chuckles rippled through the room. I'm not here today to talk about the video, he said. You've all seen it more times than anyone should have to watch themselves from that angle. Scattered laughter. The tension eased a notch. I'm here to talk about what kind of people we want to be when no one is filming, he said. He paced slowly, not because he needed to, but because motion helped his thoughts line up. When I was your age, he continued, I cleaned toilets in this building. A few staff blinked. Some perked up. Stories like that had the ring of coached inspiration sometimes, but there was nothing polished about the way he said it. I wore a uniform with someone else's name on it, he said. I was told not to talk to guests unless they talked to me. And when they did, it was often to complain. He paused. I worked hard, he said. I showed up. I did my job. But I also watched. I listened. I wondered why some people were treated like they were doing the hotel a favor just by walking in, while others were treated like suspects, problems, intrusions. He looked around the room. Decades later, I can afford the penthouse, he said. I own the building. But the way I was treated in that lobby told me something important. Money and titles don't automatically change how the world sees you when you walk into a room like this. He let that sink in. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Mr. Hayes, it's not like we treat everyone badly. Most of the time, we're polite. We smile. We say welcome. And that's true. Most of you do a beautiful job making people feel at home. He smiled at the housekeeping team. I've seen the notes guests leave about how the room feels cared for, he said. That's you. I've read the comments about security helping someone find their lost child. That's you. I know the front desk agent who stayed past her shift to help an elderly guest get medicine. That matters. He took a breath. But here's the thing about hospitality, he said. It's not judged by how we treat the easiest guests. It's judged by how we treat the ones who challenge our assumptions. The ones who look like they don't fit. The ones who arrive tired, frustrated, dressed in ways we don't associate with the rates on our website. He leaned forward slightly. If we only extend full dignity to people who look like they belong here, he said, then this isn't hospitality. It's a costume party with a cover charge. A hush rolled through the room. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, wow. I'm not asking you to ignore your training, Leonard continued. We absolutely have to keep everyone safe. But safety and suspicion aren't the same thing. He gestured loosely, mimicking holding a walkie-talkie. If the first story your mind tells you when you see a black man at the front desk with an old duffel bag is danger or fraud, he said, I need you to ask yourself where that story came from and who benefit from you believing it. He saw nods now, thoughtful frowns, a couple of folded arms starting to uncross. I can't reach into your heart and rearrange what's in there, he said. That's your work. What I can do is change the systems we operate in so that they don't reward snap judgments and punish compassion. He looked toward Turner, who sat halfway back, out of uniform, hands on his knees. Accountability isn't about finding someone to throw under the bus, Leonard said. It's about making sure the bus isn't running people over in the first place. Soft laughter, heavier this time. Turner, Marina, and I have had some very difficult conversations recently, he said, not shielding their names. They owned up to what they did. They are facing consequences. They are also doing the work, real work, not check-the-box modules, to understand why they made the choices they did. He glanced at them both. They looked back, faces open, vulnerable. If they commit to that work, Leonard said, and if the people they've hurt see genuine change over time, they'll have a place in this company. Not because we're brushing what happened under the rug, but because I don't want to build a culture where one mistake, no matter how serious, gets you cast out forever while the system that shaped you stays the same. He straightened. We will be judged for how we treat our guests, he said, and we will also be judged for how we treat each other when we get it wrong. He smiled, a little sadly. I have spent a lifetime being told where I do and don't belong, he said. In schools, in boardrooms, in lobbies like this. If I've learned anything, it's this. Dignity is not a luxury amenity. It's not something we offer only when someone pays enough to earn it. It is the baseline cost of admission for us to call ourselves human. He let the silence grow heavy, then light again. So here's what I'm asking of you, he said. The next time someone walks up to your desk, or into your restaurant, or down your hallway, and something in you whispers, they don't belong here, pause. He held up a hand. Just one breath, he said. In that breath, ask yourself 2 questions. 1, what evidence do I actually have for that thought, beyond what this person looks like? 2, if I treat them as if they belong, and I'm wrong, what's the worst that happens? Versus, if I treat them as if they don't belong, and I'm wrong, what damage might I do? He looked around. If you can start doing that, even just that, you'll make fewer people feel small in places they came to feel seen. He stepped back from the podium. I built this company because I wanted to create spaces where people like my youngest self could walk in and feel, for a night, like the world was kinder than it had been outside, he said. But the truth is, I can't do that alone. I never could. It's in your hands. Every check-in, every glance, every decision to slow down and see the human being in front of you. He spread his arms slightly. You are the crown, he said. Not the logo. You. Wear it well. The applause started slowly, then swelled, not thunderous but steady. Some staff stood. Some stayed seated, eyes wet, clapping quietly. Turner's applause was small but earnest. Marina's was shaky, but she added her hands to the sound. Leonard stepped down. He was tired. Bone-tired. But something in his chest felt lighter than it had since that morning in the lobby. 6 months later, the Miramar Crown lobby felt different. To a casual guest, the changes might have been invisible. The marble was still polished. The chandeliers still shimmered. The string quartet played on Saturdays. But there were subtler shifts. The front desk screens now included a small note next to each reservation. Pronouns, accessibility needs, preferred name. Staff had started using those fields, not skipping them like optional checkboxes. Security logs had little tags next to each incident report, behavior-based, appearance-based. The latter category had a bright red column that no one wanted to see filled. The training room on the lower level was busier than it had ever been. Not because people were being punished with seminars, but because the new series, Stories of Welcome and Warning, featured rotating speakers who made the sessions feel less like lectures and more like family meetings. One week, a longtime bell attendant talked about how invisible he'd felt his whole career. Another week, a black travel blogger shared horror stories and triumphs from hotels worldwide. There were awkward moments, tearful ones, a few angry ones. They were all allowed. The advisory council Leonard had insisted on met monthly, both in person and virtually. They had veto power over any new policy that touched guest treatment. The first thing they killed was a proposed loyalty tier fast track that would have given special perks to guests with certain credit cards. Hospitality, one council member pointed out, should not depend on which bank likes you. Miramar Crown's quarterly report showed a dip in short-term revenue. Some investors grumbled. But guest satisfaction scores among Black and other guests of color rose significantly. So did staff retention. Other hotel groups took notes. Some copied Miramar's language without doing the work. Others quietly reached out to Leonard, asking for advice. He shared what he'd learned, but always with the same caveat. If you just want to avoid bad press, he said, call a publicist. If you want to change how your people move through your spaces, you're going to have to be willing to be uncomfortable for a while. Not everyone liked that answer. He gave it anyway. As for Turner, he took his suspension as a line in the sand. He went to every workshop offered. He read books his teenage son recommended, books with titles like The History They Didn't Teach You and Policing the Black Body. He listened more than he spoke. When his review came up, Leonard sat across from him in a small office. Why do you want to come back? Leonard asked plainly. Turner swallowed. Because this is my job, he said. It puts food on my table. That's not enough, Leonard replied. You can get a job anywhere. Why here? Turner thought for a long time. Because I don't want my son to see that video and believe that's all I am, he said. A man who grabs first and thinks later. If I run from this, that's the story that sticks. If I stay and change, maybe he sees something else. Leonard regarded him. Change isn't a PR campaign, he said. You know that. I do, Turner said. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm asking you to let me repay it with better choices. Leonard nodded slowly. We'll try this, he said. On probation. Visible, not hidden. If you start to slip into old habits, there will be no second suspension. Understood? Understood, Turner said. He came back to work. He walked the lobby differently now. Softer, more aware of the stories he was stepping into. When younger guards made jokes that started with "you know how they are," he cut them off. Who's eh? He'd ask. Be specific. The jokes dried up. Marina returned too. Her bun a little looser, her edges softened. She requested a transfer from guest experience manager to a new role Leonard had created, Director of Inclusion and Welcome. You sure you want this? He asked her. She nodded. I don't want anyone else to feel what you felt that day, she said. And I don't want any of our staff to be left alone with their blind spots the way I was. She sat in on interviews now, listening for more than polished answers. The live stream kid, the one whose video had started it all, posted a follow-up months later. He'd come back with his girlfriend, booked a weekend stay using a discount code Miramar had offered to guests affected by the incident. He filmed a quieter lobby, a front desk agent greeting a family in hoodies and backpacks with the same warmth as a man in a suit. Back at the scene of the crime, he said into the camera, half joking. Honestly, it feels different. Maybe that's me. Maybe it's them. But, yeah, I'd come back. His video didn't go as viral as the first one. It didn't need to. Leonard, for his part, slipped into the building less often now. He had other properties to visit, other young managers to mentor, a scholarship program to oversee. He spent more time speaking at colleges than at board meetings. But sometimes, on a slow afternoon, he would find himself standing across the street from the Miramar Crown, watching people walk in and out. He'd see families, business travelers, couples, solo wanderers. Some rolled their luggage with the ease of habit. Others stepped through the revolving doors like they were crossing a border into a world they'd only seen on screens. He watched the staff greet them. He saw small things, a guard holding the door for a teenager with pink hair instead of side-eyeing him, a clerk patiently explaining the amenities to a guest whose English was halting, without rushing or condescension. He knew there would still be failures. People didn't unlearn decades of programming in 6 months. The work would never be done. But the cracks he'd seen that morning had been patched, not with wallpaper, but with something sturdier. When he did walk through the lobby now, most guests didn't look twice at him. Sometimes, a staff member would nod and say, "Welcome back, Mr. Hayes." Sometimes, they didn't recognize him at all and simply said, "Good afternoon, sir. How can we make your stay comfortable today?" Both were fine. He didn't need them to know his name to treat him right. That was the whole point. One evening, as the sun slid behind the skyline, casting the lobby in amber light, Leonard paused by the giant wall of framed black and white photographs that had been installed near the lounge. The installation was new. Each frame held an image of someone connected to hospitality in ways that had rarely made the glossy brochures. A housekeeper tying her shoes, a breakfast cook flipping pancakes, a bell attendant laughing with a child, an elderly couple checking in with backpacks, a security officer adjusting his tie. In the center, an empty frame held a small engraved plaque, reserved for the next story we are proud to tell. Leonard smiled. As he turned to go, a young front desk agent looked up and caught his eye. "Evening, sir," she said. "Heading out." "Just passing through," he replied. "Hope we treated you well," she said earnestly. He held her gaze for a heartbeat longer than usual. "You did," he said. "And if you hadn't—" He let the sentence hang. She laughed nervously, then understood the twinkle in his eye. "Then we'd fix it," she said. "That's all I ask," he replied. He stepped out into the cooling air, the lobby doors whooshing shut behind him. The city moved around him, buses groaning, people talking, a courier weaving between cars. He walked slowly, his old duffel swinging at his side. For a moment, his mind slipped back to that long-ago night, scrubbing stains out of carpet, listening through elevator doors. So much had changed since then. So much had not. He knew there were 1,000 other lobbies around the world where someone who looked like him would still be questioned, doubted, turned away. He couldn't fix them all, but he could keep working on this one, and the next, and the minds that moved within them. As he reached the corner, his phone buzzed. A text from his wife. "How did it feel today?" He typed back, less like a fight, more like a conversation. 3 dots appeared. "That's progress," she replied. He slipped the phone away, heart a little lighter. And now, here you are. Maybe reading this on a screen, maybe watching a version of it on your phone, maybe hearing someone tell it over coffee. It's tempting, isn't it, to cast yourself in the best role when you imagine that lobby? To insist you'd have spoken up, that you'd never treat someone that way, that you'd be the one filming for justice, not for drama. But the truth is, most of us don't know who we'd be in a moment until we're standing in it. So here's the question Leonard would ask you if you were in that lobby with him. The next time you see someone being quietly pushed to the edges of a space, told with eyes, or tone, or policy that they don't belong, what will you do with that one breath between noticing and acting? Will you look away? Will you hit record and call it enough? Or will you be the person who steps closer, who asks, gently but firmly, are we sure we're treating this person the way we'd want to be treated if the whole world were watching? You don't need to own a hotel to change the temperature of a room. You just need to choose, in that breath, what kind of crown you're going to wear.